Today, I'm going to show you how to paint layers of leaves using a negative painting technique with a twist. This is the same technique I use to paint these gorgeous green pieces that I'm asked about all the time. Negative painting is a technique where you paint the negative space around a shape to define the positive space. It's a simple technique that looks amazing when you use transparent watercolors and add a lot of layers. The problem is it's hard to paint around all those shapes as you build up the layers. And it's almost impossible to create complex layered paintings like these. I mean, this one is a whole jungle. To make negative painting easier, even for complex subjects, you just need one extra supply: masking fluid. That's the twist. In my negative painting process, I use masking fluid to mask the positive shapes. This involves alternating layers of masking fluid and paint to create incredible depth. If you think you can't put masking fluid on top of paint, think again. And if you haven't tried it, you're missing out. It's the only way to create magic like this. In this tutorial, I'm going to teach you the basic process with this smaller money tree painting. There's a link to the money tree line drawing below the video. For tips on how to transfer a drawing to watercolor paper, check out my tracing hacks video. I'm starting this painting with a wet on wet layer to block in the lightest colors. I used a kneaded eraser to lighten the pencil lines on the leaves that will be the lightest and left darker pencil lines where the paint will be darker. I wet the entire paper and I'm adding a light wash of color starting with a yellow-green on the lightest leaves, the ones that appear in the front. I'm using a mix of New Gamboge and Phthalo Green for the yellow-green color. Then I added in some Phthalo Blue to make a blue-green on the background leaves. I add color over the entire page quickly so the paper stays evenly wet. Then I go back in with more pigment to deepen the colors. I want to make sure the color isn't too light when it dries. Also, it's important to remember that masking fluid can lighten the color even more, so don't go too light on your initial layer. After I apply the paint, I use a tissue to wipe the excess paint off the tape edges. I won't show it every time, but I wipe off the tape like this after each paint layer. Then I let this layer dry completely. You can use a hairdryer to speed up the paint drying process. Now I'm using a dip pen to mask the veins on the leaves. This will lock in the lightest color for the veins. With regular negative painting, it would be really tricky to paint around all of these veins, but with masking fluid, it's easy to protect them. Now I can add as many layers of paint as I want on top, and the veins will stay light. I'm using the dip pen to mask these fine lines. You could also use a small brush or a ruling pen. Check out my video on the 3 best masking fluid tools for more tips on applying masking fluid. Let the masking fluid air dry for 10 to 15 minutes. I never use a hairdryer on wet masking fluid. For full step-by-step instructions on how to apply and remove masking fluid, download my free ebook, Masking Magic. Look for the link below the video. Now I'm wetting the entire paper again to do a second wet on wet layer of color. For this layer, I'm using the same colors in the same places. This layer will darken the leaves slightly to contrast with the veins. I'm only trying to make the color one value darker than the first layer. I'm still focusing on the lightest leaves, making sure they stay yellow-green. I'm adding more blue to darken the bottom left corner of the painting because I want it to feel like the light is coming from the top right. I let this layer dry completely. You can use a hairdryer to dry the paint and it won't affect the dried masking fluid. Just use the hairdryer on a lower setting and keep it several inches above the paper. Now it's time to lock in the lightest color for the stems and leaves. First, I'm masking off the stem on the left side since it's in front of the leaves on that side. I'm also going to lock in the color for the lightest leaves. They are the focal point of the painting and I want them to stay this light yellow-green color. I'm using a brush to apply masking fluid on all the leaves that I want to remain the lightest. I'm masking right over the veins I masked earlier. So right now I'm painting the positive shape of the leaves with the masking fluid. This will allow me to add color to the negative space around these leaves and they'll stay protected under the masking fluid. I'm masking just the top side of this leaf that's sticking up. I'll mask the back of the leaf later since I want it to be a darker value. I switched to a larger brush to paint the larger leaves. I'm using a line drawing as a guide for this painting, but for most of my paintings like this, I paint the masking fluid freehand. When you get more comfortable with the process, you can apply the masking fluid freehand and use the brush to create natural looking leaf shapes. Usually by the end of the painting, I can't see the pencil lines anyway and end up painting freehand. My camera cut out here, but this is what the finished layer of masking fluid looks like. I let it air dry completely for 10 to 15 minutes. Now I'm building up color for the next layer of leaves. I wet the entire paper again and I'm painting wet on wet. I want these leaves to be 1 or 2 values darker than the lighter leaves I just masked off. So I've added a little more pigment to the paint I used for the last wash. As I paint, you can see the leaves I masked off stand out more. Because of the masking fluid, I can paint this entire layer wet on wet in just a few minutes. I don't have to try to paint around all the lighter leaves. That's how I get such smooth color in my negative paintings. I'm using a tissue to wipe the paint droplets off the larger masked areas, and then I let this layer dry completely. Here's where the masking fluid gets really helpful. I'm masking the next layer of leaves, and I can paint the masking fluid right over the first layer of leaves. The leaves I'm masking now will appear below the first layer of leaves in the finished painting. I'm masking the back side of the leaf I started in the first layer. Now the back of the leaf will appear to fall behind these leaves in front. With masking fluid, I can paint these new leaves right over top of the first layer of masking fluid. This way, I can use continuous brush strokes to paint the leaves. Remember, I'm masking the positive shapes. Each new layer I mask will appear below the previous layer in the finished painting. I'm rinsing my brush often in soapy water so the masking fluid doesn't build up in the bristles. Before I dip back into the masking fluid, I blot the brush dry to remove excess water. I don't want to dilute the masking fluid. In regular negative painting, you have to paint the negative space around all the previous layers. So when you're painting around the second layer of leaves, you also have to paint around the first layer again. The more layers you add, the more complicated it gets. Painting the negative space that way can be hard to visualize. On the other hand, with masking fluid, you can paint the positive space, in this case the leaves, and then add color to the negative space in one continuous wash. You can create really detailed, complex paintings with masking fluid that would be impossible to achieve with regular negative painting. I let the masking fluid air dry completely. Are you enjoying this advanced layering method? It's one of the 7 masking fluid techniques I cover in my free ebook, Masking Magic. Get your copy of Masking Magic at the link below the video. This is the 4th wash. I didn't pre-wet the paper this time. I just went straight in with paint because I don't want to dilute my darker colors. I'm building up the color for the 3rd layer of leaves, which will be the darkest leaves. I want them to be 1 to 2 values darker than the last layer. I added more blue to my green mix to make it darker, but it's still nice and fluid. Because the watercolor is transparent, the value builds up easily with each layer of paint. With this masking fluid technique, you don't ever have to paint with thick, sticky paint to get a dark value. You can keep the paint mix fluid and still achieve dark values because of the layers underneath. I let this layer dry completely. I'm masking the final layer of leaves now. I can't really see the pencil lines anymore, so I'm looking at the line drawing as a reference and freehanding the leaves. I'm using the veins I masked earlier as a guide for where the leaves go. I can paint these leaves right over all the other masking fluid layers, which makes it easy to create natural leaf shapes with my brush. My painting is dry here, but you might see the masking fluid is picking up some paint color. It's actually reactivating some of the paint droplets that dried on the previous layers of masking fluid. It's nothing to worry about. I let this final layer of masking fluid air dry completely. For the last layer of paint, I'm going very dark. This is the background color. Everything else is masked off, so I can go as dark as I want. Don't be afraid to go too dark here. To really make these paintings glow, you need to create a strong contrast between light and dark. I'm painting with straight phthalo blue for this darkest layer, but it will still look green in the finished painting because of all the layers beneath it. I let this final wash dry completely before removing the masking fluid. It's time for the masking fluid reveal. This is so much better than a tape reveal. I'm using a masking fluid remover to take off the layers of masking fluid. This is my favorite part where you get to see the true colors of the painting. Look at those glowing leaves. This negative painting technique creates so much depth. The masking fluid adds an extra step in between each paint layer, but it allows you to quickly apply the color to the negative space and maintain nice, crisp edges around all the leaves. If you've struggled with regular negative painting or found it too tedious to paint around all the layers, I hope you'll give this masking fluid technique a try. If you're hooked on negative painting now, check out my negative painting playlist for more tutorials.